The 10 highest quality protein based on two very important scoring systems. Now, I'll abbreviate this because this is very in-depth science that we don't really need to go into a lot of detail into in this video. But we're gonna look at two scores. One is the PDCAAS, which is the Protein Digestibility Corrected Amino Acid Score, which essentially measures how much protein can get absorbed or how many of the amino acids can get absorbed when you consume a certain food. That's how you have a ranking system. One is the perfect score with PDCAAS. With the other score, which is called DIAAS, that is Digestible Indispensable Amino Acid Score. This is, in scientific terminology, not truncated. What that means is you're not limited at 100%. You can go above 100% availability. So you can really get an accurate representation of what the highest quality protein is. Now, to give you a quick, just abbreviation of how they measure this. PDCAAS, they measure in the feces. So how much protein has gone through, what's been absorbed, et cetera, et cetera. With DIAAS, they measure in what's called the ileum, which is further up in the intestine, which is a better representation of what's actually getting absorbed. So enough scientific gobbledygook, let's just get into the foods you want to eat. Now, after today's video, I put a link to our sponsor, which if you're worried about protein availability, your gut does matter. So it is a relevant sponsor to have in this video. It's Seed, a daily synbiotic. It's the only probiotic that I ever recommend, the only one I ever talk about on my channel, and that's a 25% off discount link down below. So that link down below gets you 25% off their daily synbiotic, which is a prebiotic and a probiotic in one capsule for multi-stage delivery, which is really cool technology, but they're also on the forefront of the scientific research when it comes to the microbiome. So the microbiome plays a huge role in protein breakdown and potential absorption in our body as well. So it makes a lot of sense that if you're trying to get more out of your food, you would take care of your gut. So I think a good probiotic, more fiber, and taking care of your gut in the first place is a great place to start. And that link down below gets you 25% off that place to start. So check out Seed after this video. Okay, some of these things are going to surprise you. The highest one on my particular list, now we can go higher. Okay, I will say, full disclaimer, the highest one is actually whole milk powder, but I'm gonna kind of disregard that one because people aren't usually eating whole milk powder randomly. But it just goes to show the potential digestibility of the amino acids in whole milk powder are actually quite strong. Okay, now let's move on. Surprising one. Number one is bacon, but I'm gonna talk about other things too. Here's the deal with bacon when it's roasted in this particular case. It's roasted or smoked. With bacon, the protein to fat ratio is so bad that it's not exactly something you want to set out to get as your primary protein source. So just because it has a score of 142%, of 142, that doesn't mean that it's the best possible protein you can eat, because there's other things that come into play with it, right? Depending on where you get your bacon, you've got nitrites and nitrates, you've got other garbage added in, you've got, all kinds of stuff. So I don't suggest that, but it's still interesting. Number two is pork loin. It looks as though pork actually generally gets a pretty decent score. It's not too bad on the PDCAAS score either, but we're looking at all DIAAS scores here because it's a little bit more accurate and not truncated. So with pork loin, we're at a 139. Okay, again, 100 is considered perfect. You can go above 100, so not bad there. Number three is whey protein concentrate, which is 133. Here's the deal with whey protein concentrate. It's going to be harder if you're sensitive to dairy. Personally, I opt for whey protein isolate most of the time because whey protein concentrate makes me feel bloated and gives me gas, and I don't feel as good with it. I actually feel like I hold water from it, and a lot of people feel that way. That's my own anecdotal experience. I tend to opt for whey protein isolate where the protein is isolated away from everything else. But as we'll see further on down the line, whey protein concentrate is more bioavailable. It's just less pure. Number four, surprisingly, is ham, but how it's cured makes a difference. So slow cured ham, not rapid cured where it's high heat and has a bunch of other stuff added to it. With ham, we're looking at about the same DIAAS score as whey protein concentrate. Now here we get really interesting. Number five is a roasted ribeye at medium temperature. So not cooking at super high temperature. This is where it gets really interesting with DIAAS score is we could get super granular. I could make this a 500-minute video okay? Because how you cook different foods affects the amino acid availability. But if you're trying to get every bit of protein that you can out of food, you should pay attention to how you cook food. I don't know a lot of people that roast ribeyes. Most people that cook ribeyes are just gonna, put them on the grill or whatever, but roasting a ribeye is gonna put it at 130. So pretty darn good source of protein and amino acid availability. Number 6 is whey protein isolate at 125. So that's what's kind of interesting is whey protein isolate is still very, very high, but it's lower than whey protein concentrate. And it's for the reasons that I mentioned. So if you just want pure protein without anything else, lower calorie, whey protein isolate's the way to go. Very, very good. We need a quick, high insulinogenic spike that's going to get you your protein and that insulin spike that you need to absorb it fast. So even though the protein availability might be less than concentrate, you might get a bigger uptake and a bigger tick in muscle protein synthesis. And a hot tip, if you take some omega-3s along with your whey protein, you might increase the muscle protein synthesis along with it. Number 7 is egg at 122. So at 122, eggs still make very, very high mark here. However, what's funny is when we look at PDCAAS score, well, with that, egg is like almost a perfect 1. Being 1 is as high as we can get. So egg is about as perfect on the PDCAAS as we can get, but it falls further down the line when we look at actual ileum measurements. So it's hard to tell. Maybe some of the protein in eggs doesn't fully digest and it kind of gets messed up as far as the numbers are concerned, which makes sense because a lot of people, when they eat eggs, they end up getting that sulfury gas, right? So maybe we're not breaking it all down. Number 8 is going to be ground beef. And in its raw form, it's about 121. When it's cooked sort of a medium rare, it drops down to a 110, sometimes lower. I don't know many people other than Paul Saladino that are really going around eating like ice cream cones with raw beef. But you get a lot of other benefit with beef too. So that's the other things we have to factor in. With eggs, you're getting nutrition, you're getting choline, you're getting B vitamins, you're getting beta carotene. With beef, you're getting more nutrition, you're getting micronutrients, you're getting iron, right? So it's not all just about the protein, it's about the confounding variables and the things that also make that protein more available and usable in a holistic fashion in our entire body. Now it's kind of funny is if you look at Phillips 2017, hard-boiled eggs drop down to like a 110 to 113. So hard-boiling an egg versus even a raw egg is actually lower bioavailability. However, a raw egg is not always the best thing to consume. There's a lot of people out there that say a raw egg actually does not absorb as well. But the literature actually says that, okay, it might work for some people. However, here's the interesting thing. Is it really worth the squeeze? Is the juice worth the squeeze of consuming a raw egg? We're talking a pretty small difference when we still have a hard-boiled egg being at a 113 on the DIAAS. I'd go with the hard-boiled and do something that actually tastes good. Number 10 is a chicken breast at 108. So a very high score. And as far as clean, simple protein without a lot of calories, protein to calorie ratio, chicken breast is pretty darn bioavailable. And when you start getting into chicken thigh, it actually tends to come down because the fat can denature, or shouldn't say denature, but can slow down some of the digestion, which actually might impede how many amino acids you absorb. But if you look at different scores and different studies, sometimes they have different scores, which the microbiome could make a huge difference in what we utilize as well. So there's a level of bioindividuality here as well. So that's 10, but now I want to talk about 4 that are further on down the scale that may not be the best, but just to give you an idea of how things start to go downhill. Soy protein concentrate comes in at a 98.5. So in a non-truncated form, it's still almost 100%. But when you start looking at it in a PDCAAS form, then you're looking closer from like 0.9 all the way up to like 0.98. So soy can still be very viable, but it does show you how different it is from, say, like pork, which is way up above 100. So in this particular case, if you go for soy, try to go for fermented soy that's possibly easier to digest, tempeh or maybe even natto. Soy isolate comes in at a 90. So in the same kind of discussion like we had with whey protein, it's in its concentrated form, it has more protein and more volume. The isolated form denatures a tiny bit, even though it's purer. Chickpea comes in at 83. Chickpea I would consume for fiber. I wouldn't consume for protein. And it's not exactly full spectrum. You don't get all the amino acids out of it. And I put this one in here not because it's next in line, but because it's a perfect example of how we get further down the line and all of a sudden we have less bioavailability. Plant proteins are generally inferior to animal-based proteins only because the amino acid profile, okay? And the literature suggests this. It doesn't mean that you can't combine plant-based proteins and make a perfect score. But here's something kind of interesting. When you look at a mixed score of certain foods, sometimes it goes down. So in this particular case, a mixed diet of wheat, peas, and whole milk is an 83. This is so fascinating because whole milk powder was like a 143, if you remember. Whole milk powder on its own was a 143, very, very high. But when you mix whole milk powder with pea and with wheat, it lowers the amino acids. It lowers this DS score. So what could be going on there? I can only speculate that maybe it's impeded the digestion to a certain degree. Maybe there's an inflammatory effect. Maybe there's an issue with the wheat. The whole point is when you combine these things, it's not as simple of digestion as having it purely. Now, I would like to see certain things like combining maybe something higher glycemic with these proteins to see if that changes the score. It's a very hard figure to look at, but at the end of the day, when you look at lots of literature, you can see what the best amino acid availability is. So as always, keep it locked in here on my channel. I'll see you tomorrow.